Hey, it's Kelly. Welcome back to my channel where we talk all about gentle skincare, sometimes self-care, and today we're talking weightless sunscreen. This is Numbuzin No.1 Clear Filter Sun Essence. And I'm really excited to review this sunscreen because I have to say, when I bought this, I wasn't expecting too much, but this sunscreen really impressed me from the texture to the ingredients to the performance. So if you're so ready to dive into this sunscreen and hear all of my thoughts, give the video a big thumbs up and let's jump right in. So this sunscreen has a few claims that they make about this. Number one, it claims to have a weightless texture. It also claims to be appropriate for oily skin as well as acne prone skin. It claims to have a soothing, refreshing, cooling effect on skin. And it also claims that it works really well under makeup. Let's dive into the ingredients. This is a fully chemical sunscreen using 5 all new generation chemical filters. This is achieving SPF 50 plus PA plus 4 protection. Now you may know that when the label says SPF 50 plus, when there's a plus after that number, that means that the sunscreen has actually tested above SPF 50. It's actually achieving more. It's just legally they can't say like SPF 55 or 60 in certain countries, right? And so they use that plus to denote that it has achieved definitely 50, but actually above 50. And so the testing for this sunscreen reveals that the SPF here is actually achieving about a 55, give or take, because these tests always have variables, right? So it's within an SPF 55 range. Now, I was really excited to see the PA rating through the testing, because as you know, using the PA plus system, the 4 pluses is actually the maximum rating that a sunscreen can achieve when using that system. Now in Korea, the PA that you have to reach, and basically what this is it is measuring the UVA protection of a given sunscreen. And you know, those are the rays that go a little bit deeper, can damage the collagen, can speed up the aging process, right? And so the rating that you have to achieve, like the minimum that you have to achieve in order to get that maximum rating in Korea, is actually a PA of 16, which isn't bad, right? It's obviously, like I said, it's the minimum for the best rating. But I was pretty excited to see that this Numbuzin sunscreen through testing actually is testing a little closer to a PA of 21.6. So it's offering pretty decent UVA protection, especially knowing that that PA plus 4 system is not really great. It's not very specific, right? So it actually is a little bit higher than a lot of the K-beauty sunscreens on the market right now. This sunscreen also contains niacinamide, 8 forms of hyaluronic acid, and then they're using like a soothing complex of extracts in this. And this is really where some of the anti-inflammation benefits, the anti-redness benefits, where they're saying that this is very appropriate for acne prone skin. I believe it is due to these extracts that they're using here. They're using 20% of licorice root water, 15% of centella extract, as well as 14% of heart leaf extract or Hutainia cordata extract. And all 3 of these actually have really good anti-inflammation properties. They can soothe redness on the skin, have a calming effect on skin. So definitely a goodie there. And as you notice, this sunscreen does not contain any forms of fragrance, no essential oils, no fragrant compounds, and no drying forms of alcohol. So the texture of this is so impressive because at first you're gonna think this is just like every other K-beauty sunscreen out there, right? It's got the gel cream texture. This definitely has that. Looks like a cream. As you spread it, you see it's a lot thinner than a traditional, like a lotion or really creamy type of sunscreen. There's a hydration gel-like element to this, and it definitely spreads really easily, very effortlessly across the skin, and it kind of almost like disappears, and that's really that gel effect. It becomes very transparent, but this actually feels very weightless on the skin. They absolutely, you know, the claim is that it's very lightweight. It absolutely is so lightweight, so breathable, and really the word I'm embracing here is weightless on the skin. I was very impressed with this, and this is not like every other gel cream texture. You spread it across the skin, you feel that hydration, you feel that thinness, and it starts to absorb very, very quickly into the skin, almost in a way disappearing onto the skin, and has a very quick dry and absorbency. Absolutely no white cast here. This actually blends really well into the skin, so you're not going to get, sometimes I'm very generous with my sunscreen applications. Sometimes I get these streaks because I didn't rub it in super well. And so sometimes I'll notice in the mirror that I'll have these like little white streaks across my face. Absolutely did not occur with this sunscreen at all. Nothing built up around my dark eyebrows or my dark hairline. So I do believe that this would be a very beard friendly sunscreen. It's not going to build up all clumpy and white, right? So no white cast. Definitely a very, very pleasing, lightweight, breathable texture. Is super impressive. Something else I was really impressed with is the finish of this sunscreen, because I would say maybe there's a hint of dew, but it's really not overly shiny. It's not a glass skin sunscreen. It's not something that contributes to a lot of like that wet look or that shiny look on skin, which some people absolutely love. Some people absolutely hate. Some people feel kind of neutral on. I'm kind of neutral, but I have to say this is a sunscreen that they're saying is appropriate for oily skin. If you got oily skin, you don't really need additional dew, right? You already got the dew going on. So I love that this sunscreen really has kept that in mind in the finish. There's really not a lot of shininess to this at all. So let me tell you about the performance and my experience using this sunscreen, because, you know, I really wasn't expecting much from this. I have to say, when I bought this, I just bought it because it was Numbuzin, and there's been so much interest in the brand lately. And so many of you have asked me to review more of the Numbuzin products. So I've slowly been, you know, as I can afford to, buying more and more of their products, right? And so I picked up the sunscreen thinking, hey, you know, I'll get some content out of this, but I wasn't expecting much, quite honestly. And as I shared back in January when I reviewed the Benton Cica Gel sunscreen, I've been really burnt out on sunscreens over the last like year and a half. The K-beauty sunscreen market is so incredibly oversaturated, which is true of every corner of skincare right now, quite honestly, right? There's just so much out there, and it's a bit overwhelming. And not only is there so much out there, I just feel like there's so much sameness out there. All of the formulas feel very similar. They're all using kind of the same base formula, right? Tweaks here and there, but they're all kind of generally the same. They all have the general same texture. They all have the general same shininess, right? Like there's a few differences here and there, but not enough for me to feel that there's a lot of distinct and unique products that have been coming out of the market recently. And you may have noticed that in my best of 2023 video at the end of the year, I did not include any sunscreens, and that is because nothing impressed me. You know what I mean? Nothing really stood out to me as being incredibly unique, like super duper impressive. Do you know what I mean? There might have been a few here or there, but quite honestly, I just have to keep it real. You know what I mean? I'm not just going to name something for the sake of it, right? So anyways, now you know how I feel and why I was actually so impressed with this. It is different. And that's really where I've been doing the reviews, is on sunscreens that I feel are different in the market. This one is truly weightless. Especially as somebody who layers a lot of skincare onto my skin, I do appreciate a sunscreen that I know for a fact is not going to tip the balances and like ruin, right, the feel of all those lovely, luxurious layers that I lovingly, you know, put together and pat onto my skin, right? And then to go in with a sunscreen and have it just completely get really heavy and greasy. I really just like how lightweight this is. And I have to say, this is one of those sunscreens that I can forget that I'm wearing. And I love that. I know that may sound bad, like, oh, did I put my sunscreen on? Oh no. But actually I love did I put my sunscreen on? Because my skin doesn't feel irritated. My eyes aren't stinging and burning and running. I don't have a white cast all over my face making me look like a ghost. Like I actually am not being reminded that I'm wearing sunscreen because it's so weightless, it's so comfortable, and it's so non-irritating, and that's a big win. Sometimes when my skin is inflamed or irritated, even some of my favorite sunscreen formulas just don't feel super comfy. They can kind of feel a little itchy and uncomfortable on my skin. I never had that problem with this sunscreen. It's super duper comfortable, even when my skin is the most sensitive. And I was really impressed. While this is not waterproof, most Korean sunscreens aren't. If they are, it's a special thing, right? A unique thing in the market. Generally, they're not waterproof or sweat resistant, right? And so this is not that. It's not rated for that, but I was really impressed that this didn't seem to travel into my eyes. And that tends to be where eye sting occurs for me. It's really more of the sunscreen. It is so emollient, or it's sitting so much on top of my skin that it starts to migrate into my eyes, and it takes a couple of hours, but once it does, kind of hits in somewhere in my eye, and then it starts to sting, and then my eyes start to water, and it's so annoying. And I really did not experience that with this sunscreen at all. And I even worked out wearing this sunscreen quite a bit, sweating quite a bit, and I really didn't feel like it migrated into my eyes. So I was really impressed with like that stingy factor. And this definitely doesn't shift around on the skin. Like I said, really good absorbency and very fast as well. And I think that's why it actually tends to work really well underneath makeup, is that fast absorbency, something that's not going to shift around or play around with like your foundation or your concealer or anything. I think it just settles into the skin so beautifully. However, you know, rave review up until this point, I did experience some pilling with this sunscreen, and it was actually really disappointing because I've been loving so much about this. I mean, it's really checking so many boxes, but I started to get a lot of pilling when I was testing this sunscreen, and I couldn't figure it out because I wasn't consistently getting pilling. It was only sometimes, it was only some days that I was getting it. I was like, is this pilling? Is it the sunscreen? Is it something else? It was very confusing. Oftentimes we blame one product, right? Whether we put it into our routine, we start getting pilling, or we take it out of our routine, that's the product that's responsible for the pilling. But truly, pilling is a reaction between two or more products put together, right? Usually. Sometimes if you're just putting something on your bare skin and it pills, then we know, right? But oftentimes it's an interaction, and that can be tricky when you do put a lot of stuff on your face like I do. So that's why I was saying, like, I was kind of confused because I wasn't always consistently happening. And so I started playing around with my moisturizer. That's usually the first place when you get pilling with sunscreen, is maybe you can play around with your moisturizer. And I actually started to suspect the moisturizer was causing some issues because I was playing around with that with other sunscreens, and other sunscreens I've used for a couple of years started to pill on me, and I was like, oh, culprit. So I'm not saying pilling won't occur with this sunscreen, because I did read quite a few different reviews about some people saying they did get some pilling with this. So I think the chances of getting pilling with this are a little bit higher than maybe some of your other sunscreens. But at the same time, it was pretty easy for me to make those adjustments. So that's kind of like, it's not a deal breaker for me, because once I took that moisturizer out that wasn't working well with this, everything was fine. You know what I mean? Everything was great. It worked beautifully under makeup. It didn't pill. All the other things still stand. But I can't ignore the other voices out there that are saying that this has caused some pilling issues for them. And I have to also just kind of like acknowledge like that I come from a little bit of a place of privilege, I suppose. I feel like that, you know, phrase is a little bit overused, but I guess I just want to acknowledge the fact that I have access to a lot of skincare products because of my channel, right? I'm very lucky, and so I can change my moisturizer in and out very easily, and I can try lots of different moisturizers with my sunscreen. Not everybody has access to more than one moisturizer, and I totally want to acknowledge that and say that, like, if this just doesn't work for you, or if you don't even want to go there and try to experiment with it, I totally get it. It's absolutely okay. And that's something that, like I said, like I have to acknowledge in this review too. It's super easy for me to figure it out because I have lots of products to play around with, but it may actually cause a lot of frustration, right, for you. So pilling, maybe it'll happen, maybe it won't. It's a possibility that this just doesn't love heavier, more silicone-y like moisturizers. There is a very distinct possibility that it may not match with that type of moisturizer. I quickly want to address their claims around acne, that this is a sunscreen that's appropriate for acne-prone skin. And I think, yeah, I think that's a pretty fair claim to make. You know, I am congestion prone, and I'm in this awkward spot with my skin. It happens every year. So it's like clockwork, right? I was expecting it, but my combination skin fluctuates with the season. So in the winter, it leans a lot more dry. In the summer, it leans a lot more oily. In the spring, it's kind of that bumper season where the temperatures are just kind of starting to shift and wake up and warm up. And definitely my skin just kind of like does not know what it wants to do. So it kind of overproduces oil. And that's definitely where I see a lot more congestion and breakouts and a little bit more inflammation as well. And so I've been going through that right now, like clockwork, right? It's nice when you can predict it and know what's causing it. But I don't think that this sunscreen helped You know what I mean? Like, I don't think that it contributed to speeding up the healing. It may have reduced some redness, maybe. I'm not 100% sure on that, but I can confidently say it didn't make my pimples worse. You know, it didn't make my skin congested at all. It didn't clog up my pores. And so I think from that standpoint of not aggravating acne and not congesting the pores and, you know, making things worse, I think that it absolutely would be appropriate for acne prone skin. Is it going to improve your acne? No. And quite honestly, I really don't think that any sunscreen would be able to, just by the function, right, of that product and how it sits on your skin. Obviously, we know there's a lot more powerful skincare products out there that are going to help treat the acne, but I would say the sunscreen doesn't make it worse. So let's check back in with the claims that Numbuzin is making about this sunscreen. They claim that it is lightweight. Check. I agree. It absolutely is. They say that it's good for acne. As I said, I think so. Check. It is. Good for oily skin. Absolutely. I would say so. I think with that really lightweight, quick to absorb texture without that shiny finish, I think oily skin folks are going to enjoy this one. So check. Good for makeup. Maybe. My experience played out that it was really good for makeup. However, with that pilling, that may or may not occur. That's a big kind of question mark, I think. So I would say check with some reservations. Soothing, refreshing, and cooling. I would say maybe. I would say on the soothing front, I would say it's not irritating. So I would say check there. As far as refreshing and cooling, if they're referring to that slightly hydrating feel you get as you're applying the product, then yes, I would say that it does have a little bit of that effect. It's certainly not a heavy and suffocating sunscreen. So my final word on this product, as I've said quite a few times, I'm very impressed with this, and it really comes down to that weightless texture. I think it actually makes this a sunscreen that's going to be appropriate for a majority of skin types, because I haven't really covered this, but while it's so weightless and breathable and really comfortable on the skin and great, I think, if you do have a lot of oil on your skin, if you're dry skinned, just know that this sunscreen is not going to dry you out. I do feel like some sunscreens out there that are really geared towards oily skin tend to have a mattifying or sebum controlling effect that actually translates to a sunscreen that feels incredibly dry on dry skin. So I didn't actually address that, but I didn't feel any dryness, tightness, or dehydration with this sunscreen. And that's why I really am going to say I think this would be appropriate for the majority of skin types. Oily combination, balanced and even dry skin. I think this weightless texture that you will forget that you're even wearing, right? I think will feel very, very comfortable for you. For sensitive folks, it's definitely something that I think could work for you, as long as, you know, your individual sensitivities aren't here on the ingredients list, right? But I found it to be very non-irritating. It didn't sting my eyes. Really great texture, worked well underneath makeup. There is that big question mark there around the pilling. I was able to figure it out and solve that, but I think it could be a frustration point for some folks. And so that's a question I'm just not going to be able to answer for you individually. You're going to have to be brave if you're still interested to try this one out. But just know that pilling may or may not occur with this. So overall, very positive thoughts about this sunscreen. I'm rating it a 9 out of 10, and clearly I'm knocking that 1 point off for the pilling alone. So I'm curious if you've tried this sunscreen or if you're going to try this sunscreen. Let me know in the comments. And if this video helped you decide if this is the right sunscreen for you, definitely give it a thumbs up if you haven't already, but hit subscribe if you haven't joined our community yet either. I do release a lot of new skincare content throughout the week. I do long form videos, I do shorts. I'm very active here on YouTube, so don't forget to turn on notifications so you're never out of the loop. I hope you are healthy, happy, and safe, and I will talk to you in the next video. I love you so much. Bye.